Welcome to An Interview in History, where imagination meets reality. In this episode, we bring you an imaginary interview, but with real people and real facts. While the conversation you're about to hear is a creative reimagining, every detail, every event, and every quote is grounded in truth. It's a different way to explore real stories, and we can't wait for you to experience it. This week on An Interview in History, we're talking with Lyman Frank Baum. He was an American author, best known for his children's fantasy books, particularly The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, part of a series. In addition to the 14 Oz books, Baum penned 41 other novels, 83 short stories, over 200 poems, and at least 42 scripts. He made numerous attempts to bring his works to the stage and screen. The 1939 adaptation of the first Oz book became a landmark of the 20th century cinema. This interview takes place on February 6th, 1919. Today we're honored to have with us L. Frank Baum, the beloved author of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Baum.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's start at the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Certainly. I was born on May 15, 1856, in Chittenango, New York. I was the seventh of 9 children, though not all of us survived to adulthood. My father, Benjamin Ward Baum, succeeded in many businesses, including barrel making, oil drilling in Pennsylvania, and real estate. But he made his fortune in the oil business, so we were fairly well off. I grew up on my parents' expansive estate called Roselawn, which was sort of a paradise. Roselawn was located in Mattydale, New York. I was a sickly, dreamy child, tutored at home with my siblings. My mother, Cynthia Stanton, was strong and intelligent, descended, in fact, from the same family as the great suffragist Matilda Joslyn Gage, who would later become my mother-in-law. Mr. Baum, I know you said you had 8 other siblings. Can you talk a bit about that? Yes, indeed. I came from a large family, as I said. I was the 7th of 9 children, though sadly not all of us survived to adulthood. My older brother, Harry, was quite close to me, and we shared a love of reading and printing. In fact, we even collaborated on a small home newspaper when we were young. Growing up in such a big household, there was always something happening. Noise, activity, and plenty of imagination to go around.
What was school like for you?
School. Well, let's just say I was not the most conventional student. I was often sickly, which kept me home, and I was very dreamy, always with my head in the clouds. I tried military school briefly at Peekskill, but it was dreadful. I had no interest in discipline or rigidity. What I loved was writing, daydreaming, putting on plays. I even had a little printing press my father gave me when I was a boy. I printed a small journal called the Roselawn Home Journal, named after our family estate.
So, creativity struck early.
Oh, yes. I was writing from a young age, though I dabbled in many things. I bred fancy chickens, Hamburgs to be exact, and even wrote a book on them. I also ran a theater for a while, acting and managing. That was in the 1880s. I wrote plays, designed costumes, everything.
Tell us a bit about your family life. Were you married, and did you have children?
I married Maud Gage in 1882. She was the daughter of Matilda Joslyn Gage, as I said, a very forward-thinking woman and a powerful advocate for women's rights. Maud was intelligent, strong-willed. She kept me grounded. We had 4 sons together: Frank, Robert, Harry, and Kenneth. They were the joy of our lives. though we did suffer tragedy of losing our first son as an infant. Now, how did you make the transition from all your other endeavors to writing children's books? It wasn't a straight path. I worked as a traveling salesman for a while. We moved a lot. South Dakota, Chicago, always trying to stay afloat. But I loved telling stories. I would make them up for my sons and for neighborhood children. One story, the story of Dorothy and the magical land of Oz, seemed to stick. With the help of illustrator W. W. Denslow, I published The Wonderful Wizard of Oz in 1900. And it was a huge success, quite beyond what I expected. It was a fresh kind of fairy tale, American, not European. Children loved it. So did adults. I followed it with stage adaptations, which were wildly popular. The demand for more Oz stories led me to write many sequels, 14 Oz books in total. I tried to end the series more than once, but readers wouldn't let me. Now, where did the idea for Oz actually come from? It was a blend of imagination and observation. I believe fairy tales should reflect a child's world, its colors, its absurdities, its hopes. The name of Oz itself? That came from a filing cabinet drawer labeled O to Z. Simple as that. But the world grew from that small seed into something much grander. I wanted Oz to be a place where courage, kindness, and brains all had value. I'm sure that The Wizard of Oz was your most popular book. Out of the other 13 volumes, which was the most popular? You're quite right. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz was certainly the most celebrated. But if we look at the other 13 volumes, The Marvelous Land of Oz, the second in the series, was especially popular. That one introduced readers to new characters like Tip, General Ginger, and the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman's Return. It also unveiled a surprising twist. Tip was actually Princess Ozma, heir to the throne of Oz. That revelation gave the series a deeper mythology and helped set the stage for Ozma to become a central figure in the rest of the books. Many readers also loved Ozma of Oz and the Emerald City of Oz, but The Marvelous Land of Oz definitely stood out early on for its bold storytelling and the expansion of the magical world. Mr. Baum, what else did you write? Quite a bit, actually. While Oz brought me fame, I wrote under several pen names and explored many genres. You see, I never wanted to be boxed in. I also wrote adult novels, mostly light romance or adventure, under pen names. Yes, but all highly successful. What happened later in your life? I've continued writing, well into my later years. Unfortunately, financial troubles plagued me. Even with Oz's success, other ventures failed. Film companies, publishing endeavors. I filed for bankruptcy at one point in 1911. I listed debts over $100,000, a substantial sum. It was humbling. But even after that, I kept writing and turned over my royalties to help repay my creditors. My wife, Maud, was steadfast during those years, strong, supportive, practical. I wouldn't have survived without her. Still, I kept writing. In 1910, my family and I settled in Hollywood, California, before it was the movie capital. I was fascinated with the potential of film and worked to bring Oz to the screen. But wasn't The Wonderful Wizard of Oz wildly popular? Yes, but despite the success of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, financial stability was elusive for me. You see, I was always brimming with creative ideas, but not all of them were practical or profitable. Before Oz, I ran a general store in South Dakota and later a newspaper, both of which failed. I also invested in theater productions and publishing ventures, often pouring in more than I could afford. When they collapsed, they left me with significant debt. So yes, my financial life was a mix of ambition and miscalculation. But I never stopped dreaming, and in the end, I hope the worlds I created were worth more than the dollars I lost. Even Oz, though popular, didn't make me fabulously wealthy. Book royalties are modest, and I often used earnings to fund new projects. I owed much, but I'm proud to say I continued writing and paying back what I could. Not because I was forced to, but because I believed it was right. In the end, I think my heart was always with the art rather than the business. I chased dreams more than dollars, and sometimes dreams don't pay on time. Did you work on the 1919 version of Oz on film? I did see some early versions of the Oz stories, yes. I never imagined it would become such a lasting cultural icon. Now let's talk a little more about your moving to Hollywood. How did that turn out? Well, as I have said, around 1910, my wife Maud and I moved to a home in Hollywood, California, which we named Oscott. It was a modest but lovely place with a garden, chickens, and even a small writing studio. Hollywood was still in its infancy, but I saw its potential, especially for storytelling on film. Didn't you get involved with the stage? Yes, I also wrote stage plays and musicals, some based on Oz, others original. I was fascinated by early film, and even created the Oz Film Manufacturing Company in 1914 to bring my stories to the screen, though it didn't last. What do you hope most people remember about you? That I gave children a world they could escape to, where even an ordinary girl from Kansas could triumph with heart, wit, and courage. That imagination can be a very real form of magic. Thank you, Mr. Baum. It's been a joy speaking with you. And to you as well. Remember, there's no place like home. Baum passed away on May 6, 1919. Baum suffered a stroke, slipped into a coma, and died the following day, 9 days before his 63rd birthday. But before he did, he told his wife, "Now we can cross the shifting sands." That was a reference to the magical barrier around Oz, a place I truly felt I'd spend my life creating and perhaps someday joining. He passed away in 1919, 2 decades before the famous 1939 Wizard of Oz film with Judy Garland. And now, another forgotten history. How did America's first famous cowboy and the world's most beloved ballerina fall in love? How did a Confederate cavalry scout from Virginia turn Texas trail-riding longhorn herder woo and married a La Scala-trained Italian danseuse whose arrival in America and introduction to the scandalous can-can dance had enchanted and inflamed Puritan Massachusetts? Texas Jack Omohundro and the peerless Giuseppina Morlachia were both heading west at roughly the same time. He from his native Virginia to the open spaces and big ranches of Texas, and she from a long engagement at Her Majesty's Theatre in London towards New York to star in the new spectacle of The Devil's Auction on Broadway. Jack rode across the Red River and into Texas unheralded, where Morlachia's arrival on the fastest ship to ever cross the Atlantic was mentioned in newspapers across the country and greeted with the full company of the New York Academy of Music's orchestra. While Jack rose from kitchen help to cowhand to trail boss in some of the most legendary ranches of cattle across the country, Giuseppina slowly gained control of her own ballet company, using her own choreography and amassing a small fortune to purchase a working farm in Billerica, Massachusetts. While he was leading longhorns up the Chisholm Trail into Kansas and learning the language of the Comanche, she was traveling throughout the eastern half of America and receiving glowing coverage in newspapers from New York to New Orleans. While he sat across card tables and shared bottles of whiskey with Wild Bill Hickok in Hays City, she and her agent John Burke took on new theatrical challenges and more demanding roles. While he and Buffalo Bill scouted out of Fort McPherson, Nebraska, and lead European aristocrats on celebrated buffalo hunts, she and her troupe traveled to California for a long series of shows in San Francisco. Their paths crossed for the first time, according to her manager John Burke, as her troupe returned from California to Boston, stopping for a single show in Omaha, Nebraska. If Mr. Burke is to be believed, the cowboy Texas Jack and his friend Buffalo Bill were in the audience that night to see the lovely ballerina in action. When novelist Ned Buntline convinced Cody and Omohundro to star in a play loosely adapted from their real-life experiences in the West, he also managed to score a major coup when he convinced the famous dancer to join the cast as Dove Eye, the Indian maiden with a weakness for scouts. As written, her character was to fall in love with the handsome Buffalo Bill. But within a few shows, it was obvious to everyone that the stage chemistry between the beautiful Italian dancer and the Texas cowboy was undeniable. Life imitated art in the most romantic way possible. The satin-dressed ballerina and the buckskin-clad scout fell in love. When the theatrical season ended, Buffalo Bill and Texas Jack headed back to the prairie to hunt and bask in the freedom of the open plains. But it wasn't long before Texas Jack was on a train bound east. Newspapers in Rochester, New York, noted the famous cowboy arriving in their city and his sudden appearance at the theater where Malaki and her dance group were engaged. They were married 2 days later and spent the rest of their 2 short lives together. Join us next week when we talk with General George S. Patton, who was a general in the United States Army, who commanded the 7th Army in the Mediterranean theater of World War II, then the 3rd Army in France and Germany after the Allied invasion of Normandy in June 1944. Until then, take care.